All right.
We're live.
We are live.
We are live. Alhamdulillah.
Just
Bismillah ar-Rahman
checking
ar-Rahim.
just
A'udhu
the
billahi
people.
minash shaitanir rajim. Welcome everyone. Brother Bilal, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. How are you, brother?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very good. I'm
So
very
is
good.
it working? Can we test it?
Say again, sorry?
Is it working? Can we see people? If anyone comments.
Yeah, so we're currently we're live, so yeah, it should be working.
Okay. Let's start then.
Okay, Bismillah. Wa alaikum
Okay.
salam wa rahmatullah. To
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Welcome to this Sapiens Live, where we are going to be launching a new book. We already launched the book, but we are doing the live with the author, one and only Yusuf Ponders. And for those who don't know me, I am Bilal Tonyali. I'm not on the screen much, but this time I'm here and hosting this interview. I am the operations manager of Sapiens Institute. I'm mainly responsible of the learning platform. And today we are together, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. So today's book is is on Nihilism and Islam by Yusuf Ponders. Yusuf wrote this book. It was actually in the beginning it was an article, and then it turned into a book. And I just want
yeah.
to start by asking, from copying from the first line of the book. You say, I say to you, who are you and why do you care, Yusuf?
Yeah, so it was funny how it ended up becoming a book in the first place, because I have a knack to ramble. We are going to try and stop that from happening in this stream, inshallah, because it's just meant to be sort of like an oversight of it.
Yep.
But yeah, it was we were targeted at like 3,500 words for the article to begin with, and then part one was like 20,000 words or something stupid, and it wasn't finished. And then I had to do part two, and it ended up being so large. We in the end just decided to publish it as a book. So who am I? My name is Yusuf Ponders. I'm from Manchester in the UK, and I was raised as a Catholic, became atheist in my teenage years. I was someone who went through nihilism at points in my life. I know people who have experienced it, and eventually I found Islam after a very long journey, looking into it for about 7 years, from about 17 to about 24. Took my Shahada 2014. After traveling around Asia for a little bit and things like that, speaking to many people from all over the world about many different beliefs. Ended up studying philosophy at university for 3 years, doing my bachelor's. And my dissertation for my bachelor's was on nihilism, on the meaning of life. And yeah, so that just sort of sparked my interest in the subject. I ended up reading a lot of Nietzsche, and trying to get my head around the sort of atheistic approach to meaning, with regards to the universe and the things in it, so including ourselves. So that's like sort of a long story short.
That's it. Jazakallah khair. So let's talk about nihilism and its relationship with atheism. So in your story, you say that you had atheistic tendencies and you had an atheistic worldview, and that sort of end up making you a nihilist kind of, and then you turn to Islam. But not all atheists are not, or just not all people who lack meaning in their life can be described as nihilists. Or when we say someone is a nihilist, or when someone says that he or she is a nihilist, uh, it's not exactly the same thing for everyone. So how would
Yeah.
you describe nihilism from the beginning, and how would you describe its relationship with the meaning, in terms of affecting someone's life directly?
So even when I'm talking about myself as being like a sort, or having dabbled in nihilism or having experienced it to some degree, I don't mean it in the same way as, like, for example, I say that I'm a Muslim. So like this is something I've consciously adopted. It's something I thought about, and I took the step into becoming a Muslim, and it involved a number of actions, including the Shahada, that kind of thing. With nihilism, it wasn't like that, and it wasn't as though it was a constant part of my life. I would switch between sort of hedonism, and then like a sort of depressive outlook or pessimistic one. And in the pessimistic outlook, you sort of look at things and you're saying, what's the point of all of this? Like, if at the base of all of it, it is just mindless atoms or mindless matter, and there is no sort of guiding force behind it all, then all of this is completely pointless. Like, all of this has no meaning. And I'm a part of this, and therefore I have no meaning. It was more like a sickness or an illness that I would battle against and try to avoid by trying to create my own meaning, so to speak.
I
Always
think it's an important point because not everyone thinks like that. For example, you see some people watching football, following certain games, or has certain agenda in the life, career, anything else. It may be related to hedonism or it may be related to other passions. And many people don't have the time to ask those questions you have asked just now.
yeah.
I think it's kind of a blessing that you are able to ask those questions during that time, because if you weren't to ask those questions, you wouldn't realize for the beginning that there is no meaning, and then to realize there is meaning.
Yeah, and it was a sort of a constant battle against it. Like, it wasn't a conclusion I wanted. It was just what I see as like an inevitable consequence of a certain position. So if you fall into an atheistic position, you might not necessarily refer to yourself as a nihilist, or even realize that you are one or are going to become one to some degree. But I just see as it like if you reflect on the position, it inevitably leads to that. So there's a quote that gets brought up quite a lot, which is by Richard Dawkins, and basically it's the one that he's famous for saying, where it's like there's nothing in the universe but pitiless indifference, no good or evil or anything like that. And with that, I bring it up to point out something, and I often get, funnily enough, strawmanned with my use of this quote. And they try to say, "Oh, you're just trying to say that Richard Dawkins is saying that you should live life nihilistically, or that you should do this, or you should." I'm not saying Richard Dawkins is talking about any prescriptive claim when I'm making reference to this quote. I'm bringing it up to show just like an honest explanation of when you hold certain propositions, how you end up viewing the world. That's just a case of descriptive, not prescriptive. And then I'm saying, if you describe the world in such a way, then the inevitable consequence is nihilism. That is, there is nothing but pitiless indifference. That there is no ultimate meaning in anything, and that if you try to give yourself meaning, you're essentially an adult at play. You're playing a game, but you, in the same way that when, like, if any of you have children, the seriousness with which children play is something that you lose as you mature. Like, when you go from a process of being a child in that state of innocence, at some point you lose that innocence, and the state of play is no longer the same. Like, for example, when we were younger, maybe you had the same experience as me. I used to be able to play computer games carefree for days without any sense of guilt or shame. Yeah, there was like, I could just embody it. I could go out and I could play pretend with my friends. We could ride around on our bikes pretending we were some sort of superhero. We could put the can into the wheel and pretend it was a motorbike. And we took that very seriously, and it was something quite, we could play with ease. But however, you get to a point as you get older that you can do those things, but you can't do it with the seriousness as an innocent child at play. And you can't help but see that you're playing pretend. And what I think with regards to a lot of, and I think this is quite common, and people do feel this when they're creating their own meaning. From an atheistic perspective, it does feel like you are a child at play. And you can't play that game as an adult in the same way as you would have done when you were a child. And so there's always this sort of bitterness to the game. There's always this sense of sadness associated with it, I think. And this is something I think everyone sort of deals with at some point in their life, whether they admit it or not. But they try to escape it with things like hedonism, with football, with drinking culture, with drugs, with chasing women, or whatever it is that they get themselves involved in.
Yeah, they want to fill that gap of what you were mentioning. There's something missing there, so they want to fill that gap. We all try to fill that gap. And whenever we lose it, the meaning in our lives, we always try to fill that gap with certain things. I was actually talking to a friend a couple of days ago. He was talking about him getting a new computer, and when he got a new computer, might as well put some games in it and play the games I played when I was younger. And he described the feeling was nowhere near
Not the same.
feeling, not the same, not even similar.
Because and the memory was better than the redo. Like you have the same experience. It's like you have, like I have this memory of playing like Sonic the Hedgehog, Mario, like all of these things, and like I did, or even Pokemon, the Pokemon game. And then I remember like getting emulators and thinking, oh, I love the game. It's going to be so great to like re-experience that again. But you can't. And then not only that, it sort of robs the memory as well. Because now when you think of that game, where it used to sort of bring you some sort of nostalgic happiness, now you can't help but think about like the time you tried to replay it and the sadness associated with not being able to enjoy it the same way you could do when you were a child. I had this similar experience with Skyrim. Like that game when that came out. How old is that now? It's like 15 years old.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an old game. And when that first came out, that was a crazy game. I tried replaying it many years later, and I just couldn't. Like the grind was something I used to be able to enjoy, where you're trying to become a level 100 blacksmith or whatever, and I can't do these grind games anymore. Like the more you play them, and the thing is that in my atheistic state, when I was doing work, when I was trying to accrue money, when I was trying to build something of myself and like collect objects or whatever, I would get a similar feeling to how I would do playing Skyrim. Like, this is pointless. Like, what is it that I'm doing here? Why am I collecting these things? Why do I care about my social status? Why do I care about people? Why do I care? And it just, I couldn't stand it. It was just, there's a really good scene. Have you seen Pirates of the Caribbean? You know, the first one.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, you remember Captain Barbossa, the captain of the Black Pearl?
A very long time ago. I think I saw it on TV.
Yeah. So the Black Pearl is the ship that Jack Sparrow wants to get back. Yeah, it's this magical ship. And the crew of the Black Pearl are cursed because they found a cursed treasure and they took it in their greed and they spent it. And they didn't realize they were cursed until it was too late. And then by the time they realized they were cursed, they had spent all the money. They spent all the gold. And then the rest of the film is basically them going around trying to collect all the gold back so they could return it back to where it came from and to lift the curse. And there's a scene where Captain Barbossa is talking about the curse. And he's talking about, like, he's eating the food, but it never satisfies. You know, it never satisfies his hunger. He tries to drink, but it never quenches his thirst. And there's a beautiful, I think it's a hadith that mentions, you know, Adam, the son of Adam, is never satisfied. You give them a mountain of gold, and they'll just want another one. And wallahi, this is the dunya. This is the, like, if you're looking at the world from an atheistic perspective, people say, oh, you know, just enjoy yourself. And so people can. I'm not trying to negate the fact that some people can overlook the impending nihilism, the impending doom. Many people do. But it's, how long can you play that game for is the question. And the death comes to us all. And some people reflect on the end of life sooner than others. And some just try to put it to the back of their mind and try to forget it, try to avoid it, try to distract themselves with glitter and games and
It's like
films and
a
YouTube.
race to forget things, to be able to forget things, whatever makes you forget it. So, even, as Muslims, we see death. By the way, I should mention that I should ask people to pray as well that our Sheikh Fahad Taslim's mother, beloved mother, has passed away recently.
Allah have mercy on her.
May Allah have mercy on her soul. And
I mean,
please, everyone who's watching, please pray for her. Yeah, so we
and the
experience,
family. May Allah make it easy for them all.
I mean, so we experience death every day almost. We hear on the news, we hear from our relatives. We may come close to death on an accident or something else, but it's kind of our minds kind of programmed to uh, get away from that tension and anxiety, and get rid of that thought of death, because when you think about death, then life changes automatically. Whatever you
Yeah,
start thinking of death, your life has to change. And if you want to escape from that with using your passions, or if you are a motorcycle rider, or you're following football, or you're following something else, you're doing something else, it is a constant race to forget things.
yeah,
But it always reminds you. Um, and nihilism is also something. Maybe if this is a question, so when you try and forget things, forcefully forget things, you might delay remembering things. But nihilism, when you lose the meaning, it's kind of becomes automatic. Yeah, when you lose meaning, you don't
yeah,
then try to forget things. It's like your constant state of meaninglessness, and you don't
yeah.
remember that in any case. Is
So
that
this
true?
is why I describe it as like a sickness. It's just something that befalls you. And Nietzsche, what he was sort of talking about when he was writing, he was someone who lived at the end of the 1800s. He died, I think, in 1900. And a lot of his work was on the subject of nihilism. He was heavily influenced by a philosopher called Arthur Schopenhauer, whose major theme was the theme of pessimism. And you could see that, and these two were not, they weren't idiots. Like they were very intelligent people, and they were just sort of following the cookie crumbs to where they led. And they describe the world from this sort of pessimistic outlook that ultimately nothing has meaning, and that life is not worth living. And you see all of this in Schopenhauer's work. Like he's even got like a full essays on pessimism, and I quote a bit of it in the book as well. But Nietzsche was very taken by this particular thinker, and it really developed a lot of his work. And he's looking, and he was observing sort of the genealogy of the West and the development that they were making, and he's living in the world, at a point of major industrialization, the end of the 1800s, and he's watching how people are developing and people are changing, and he noticed this rise in godlessness, in the way that people were just sort of, they were throwing what was their religion under the bus, Christianity in particular. And he was noticing how a lot of the things that people held on to, a lot of the values that they had, were the result of a millennia of a tradition rooted in Catholicism or in Christianity, in particular, and that these values, they thought they could get rid of the religion and hold on to them as if they were sort of self-evident. And his claim here is that that's not true at all. None of these things are self-evident. And what he was predicting is that we're going to go into this sort of state of chaos as a society. And there's, you see that now, and there's a lot of studies that show this. So like on Pew Research as well, you can see just over the past 20 years or 30 years, during the 21st century, political division within the US is a great example, has increased exponentially, and this makes sense as far as Nietzsche is concerned, because if you let go of communal values, because Christianity for the West was like a center point, the linchpin of the community, the thing that, like the sun that everyone revolved around. And when they let go of that, he describes it as like being free floating, that everyone's just sort of now out in open space, and there's no sense of direction. There's no up, no down, no left, no right. That you're just sort of free floating, and there's no reason to hold on to anything together. And there's an understanding of how this can lead to this extreme individualism. So where people are talking about, freedom, liberty, individual, FOMO, YOLO. You've only got this one life, and if everyone is sort of obsessed with being unique, of making free choices, in as extreme a possible way as they can think of, to the degree that things that people were united upon not even that long ago, even when we were children, the idea of male and female is just being undermined and being turned into something way more complex. All of these little things that people used to just agree on and take for granted are now being deconstructed, and made, to the degree that everyone can go in a million different directions. And that's just one example. And if you're looking at the data, you can see that the politics, there's hardly any overlap anymore. Like, people find such huge disagreements in many of these subjects now, and you can see why that might give rise to like a polarization within a society, and why that might lead to increased fragmentation. Now, some might retort and say, well, we're living in the West, for example, is the most tolerant society in existence. I think that has less to do with tolerance, to be honest. I think it's more to do with advances in technology making disobedience a lot more difficult. I think people are sort of kept in line because they fear cancel culture, they fear the mob. Everything is recorded. You have security cameras. There's mass prisons. Like, there's all sorts of crazy things, I think, that keep people in line to a certain degree. But you just give someone a little opportunity, and you see how quickly these tolerant people can become quite intolerant, or quite aggressive, or quite dangerous. You look in the UK at 2012, the whole of the UK went into a riot. The whole of the UK let go of the law. Well, not even the UK, it was specifically England. But it started in London, it moved to Birmingham, it happened in Manchester, in Liverpool, and every major city in England began rioting, to the degree where, like, I don't even know how much money's worth of property was damaged. You look at the US, they had similar things. Trump, when he didn't get that second election, they started invading the parliament, the government buildings, or the government places. So I don't think it is the case that we live in a more tolerant society. I think we live in a very technologically advanced society, and this, people have this sense of fear that hovers over them, with the consequences of not allowing certain things to sort of continue. But I think people do disagree vehemently on many.
People's kind of primal instincts reveal themselves in certain occasions, and as you mentioned, technology and our communications sort of put those clashes on online spheres, or on chats or messages. But when you lose certain stuff, or when it comes to a certain level, and in a society, those clashes are inevitable, and they happen. And it's kind of, as you mentioned, technology and communication has a big part in that. Let's move on to the next chapters on the discussion. So we discussed some of the causes of nihilism, but just to summarize, what would you say, like in maybe 5 points or 3 points, the stages of falling into nihilism? What would you say to that?
So there's a few things in particular that sort of motivate it. and I do list them out in the book, and they are a sort of I'll give an analogy. So there's sometimes within families you have people that have very different opinions about a subject. Say again?
I thought you cut.
I think, is it okay now?
Go on.
Yeah, so within a family you might have a couple of members that have very different opinions. Yeah, I can hear you. Chat, if you could just let us know, is it me or is it Bilal whose internet connection is dropping slightly?
Yeah.
I think mine is fine. Can you hear me, Bilal? Yeah, they're saying it's on you, Bilal. Okay, so I'll explain while...
I'm just gonna put the router closer, inshallah.
No problem, inshallah.
Okay.
But yeah, so while he's sorting that out, I'll just sort of answer. So there's an analogy where in the family you may have people with very different opinions, and they may like to talk about them. It might get heated, but you have someone in the family who's neutral about the discussion, and then one of the, say these are two mutually exclusive positions, yeah, that they can't both be correct. One has to be wrong, one has to be right. What you have is generally there'll be someone in the family who doesn't like the tension. They don't like that these two ideas, when they come close together, that things can get heated, that the conversation can get lively. And so what you'll find is that these people who remain neutral, who are indifferent or apathetic about the discussion at hand, what they might do is they might try to sort of give each equal value and say both of you are entitled to your opinion. What you'll notice is when the discussion comes to this, to the neutral person, there's less of a concern about which one is true, and there's more of a concern of just tolerating each other and just allowing each other to sort of have that equal playing field. And this is secularism in a nutshell. With secularism, you have this multicultural society, and you have many different viewpoints because you've got people coming from all over the world into these cosmopolitan mixing pots. And the thing is when you put these people side by side, you find that they have mutually exclusive positions and values, and that they don't all agree on the same things. Like, for example, Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, who died on the cross and was raised, and that this was all part of our salvation, so that we could be forgiven for our sins. Islam does not believe that. Islam says something quite contrary to this and says, no, Jesus is not the Son of God. He did not die for our sins. He was a prophet and a messenger of God. The atheist says something contrary to both of these and say, no, there's no such thing as a God at all. The Hindu might say, no, there's 3 million gods. And all of these people have very mutually exclusive positions. They differ in terms of how they view the world, how they view societal roles, how they think a society should be run. And if you've got a democracy and you bring all of these people with many different views from all over the world into a mixing pot, it makes sense that there would be tensions when these conversations are brought up, when these differences are flushed out and people are made to sit by one another and they're told by someone with a differing view that their position is incorrect. Like, for example, the conversations, all you need to do is watch nearly any Speaker's Corner discussion to see this play itself out, where you have a Christian getting upset because a Muslim expresses their view, or a Muslim getting upset because a Christian expresses their view. And secularism basically just seeks to level the playing field and treat all of these things as equal, because they want peace. They want sort of cohesion, and this fits into a society that wants to be productive. They want to, be progressing economically, and all of these tensions get in the way of that economic progress. If people are just fighting amongst each other, and you've got these tensions, this can cause a huge problem for societies. And if you can just get everyone to just get along and to just tolerate each other, then things can just sort of chug on ahead. But again, in the same way with the family member who's sort of picking a neutral position, they might treat each of these as equal. There's not a concern for truth here. It's a concern for cohesion. It's a concern for a peaceful environment that isn't going to give them anxiety. But the question is are any of these positions true or false? Now, even like for the atheists watching who might not believe in Islam in particular, and who might want to critique it and say, no, this is nonsense and blah, 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 blah. Well, then their position is important. To them, at least. Like if it is true that atheism is true, or if it is true that these religions are false, then surely there is some importance in trying to convince people off that position. Yeah, but this gives rise to tensions. If you're trying, and this is the thing, so secularism is still a position where it's sort of like a non-concern for the truth value of each of these positions, and it gives them all a sort of equal value. And you see this expressed in the public education system, where, like, for example, religious education, each position is just sort of boiled down to its very basic points, and they're all treated the same. And there's no wonder why children, when they're raised up in this environment where religion is just sort of trivialized, to become almost like culture. Yeah, these people wear these kind of clothes. These people wear these kind of clothes. And, they have this idea about what God is. They have this idea about what God is. It's almost like saying, they like this kind of food. They like that kind of food. It's sort of trivialized to be something that's not necessarily that fundamental. But it's not true. It is very fundamental to the people that adopt these positions. And you see how fundamental and how problematic this becomes. For example, when these come into tension, so you have the propagation of LGBT education in public schooling, and you have people who disagree with this, religious communities, from the Jews to the practicing Christians that care about this kind of thing, to the Muslims, and even to certain people who are non-religious, who might still have a problem with this kind of thing being taught in the public education system. Now, the thing is which one wins out? The LGBT community think that it is necessary to teach this to children, or there's at least a number of them that think it is necessary. And we say, no, you should not be teaching that at all. Now, this is like, there's no middle ground here. Either you're going to teach it to them or you're not. Yeah, there's like, if you even if it's a little bit, because the Muslims, the Jews, the practicing Christians here, they're like, no, you're not teaching this to our children at all. This isn't getting in to our education system. That it's not wanted there by this group of people. However, the LGBT community, the numbers that are pushing this are saying, no, this must be. We need this. Now you have to pick one or the other. Yeah, and by picking one, you're necessarily going to upset the other. If you put this into the education system, you're going to upset the religious community. And if you don't, you're going to upset the LGBT community. And so there can't be a neutrality here. There can't be, not when it comes to the teaching of children. So this idea of secularism, long story short, gives rise to this sort of leveling out the playing field, making each look as important to the other. And it sort of robs each of them of their value to the people that are supposed to embrace it. And especially if you've got like second, third generation immigrants, where their parents, they held these value systems, they held onto these religious beliefs, and they were important to them. And they held them to the degree that they did consider them more important than competing views. But then the children go into this education system, the parents are too busy working, and to really know what's going on in the school, to look into it in too much detail. And many of them maybe can't even understand, even if they could look into it, they wouldn't understand what's going on because maybe they struggle with the language. It's not their mother tongue. And so what you have is second and third generation children that come from immigrant backgrounds, or even within the indigenous population within these different places. They grow up in this sort of leveling out of all of these systems, each of them being equal, quote unquote. And it's, in the same way, like if you go to a sports day, you give everyone a medal. The medal isn't really that important anymore. No one really cares about it because you've robbed it of its value. There's not one that's better than the other. Everyone's equal, blah, 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 blah. When you do that, then there is no importance in any of these things. And so people drift away from them. Now, obviously, how does this link to nihilism now? Well, when you have these things are fundamental to how people understand where they are in the world. And when you rob people off this creates a vacuum. Yeah, because it just becomes something indifferent to them. There's not that much importance to it. But the problem is that each of these things that have been robbed of their value were fundamental to the people that held them, from the communities that they came from when they're thrown into these mixing pots. Yeah, which is what the world is becoming now. It's becoming this globalized mixing pots where everyone's just sort of being thrown into these multicultural environments, and you have this education system, and the government and all of these things. They're sort of set up in a way with certain ideas about what success is, and a lot of that is now tied to a very sort of dunya-centric mentality. It's about comfort, it's about luxury, it's about being able to enjoy life. Yeah, and this is what is the driving force of Western society at the moment. It's about making life as comfortable as possible for everyone. And when that becomes the major focus, then concerns about all of these value systems and which one's true and which one's not become secondary, because now it's like, no, these cause tensions. We're not really bothered about that. People just want to be comfortable in their homes. People want to be able to like get bread and milk and takeaways and go on holidays and this, that, and the other. That seems to be more important than anything at the moment in Western culture or Western civilization. And so, when people come and they hold on to these beliefs very strongly, this can be seen as like, oh, you want to tone that down a little bit. We don't want you expressing your views too strongly. You're entitled to your opinion, but so are they, and so on and so forth. And again, it's like that family member who's less concerned about the truth and they just want peace. But the problem is that these things are very consequential. If one of these beliefs is true, then it's not the case that we should just allow everyone to do whatever they want. Like, for example, if Christianity is true, people should become Christian. If Islam is true, people should become Muslim, because these beliefs entail that there are massive consequences if you don't. Yeah. If you're an atheist, if atheism is true, then people should be atheists. And that following these belief systems, as far as the atheist is concerned, because they're always complaining about it. Look at the religious people. Look at what they're doing. They're causing all these problems. Blah 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 blah. They're complaining about the religious communities endlessly. Well, the complaints that they have are tied specifically to the value systems that these people hold on to, and so it's in an atheistic community's what's the word I'm looking for? They should want to do dawah. They should want to convert people to atheism. And this indifference it doesn't solve these problems. And people hold on to these beliefs. And if you don't allow them the space to talk about it, okay, maybe those tensions won't rise, but it bubbles up inside. And when they have the opportunity to talk about it in the underground, whether that's off of social media, because you'll hear it. Like I can blend as a hipster with a beard. And when I'm talking to certain people that are like working class, I can hear them complain about things because they don't realize I'm a Muslim, or they don't realize that I'm Polish or whatever it is. Yeah. And you'll hear people express things that they're not willing to express publicly. Yeah. Or in a setting like on the internet where their face is on view. Or you'll see that, the increase of things like anonymous accounts, where people feel like they can express their opinions, but then you have certain terms and conditions, and people often get blocked. And so then you get the creation of these alternative social media websites where these things fester. And if you go to these places, you can see very much that there is a growing trend of controversial views and massive spectrum of them. And it's not unproblematic, because people know it's there. They're just sort of trying to brush it under the carpet. They're trying to say, no, people shouldn't, you shouldn't believe that. Like, for example, you know, the
disturbed of their current situation, and they are trying to look ways to get it fixed, or just have a clear picture, or have their opinions clash and follow the path that is not unsettling, or that is not always changing. That is something fixed and the truth, etc. We're going well, but I need to cut you there because we don't have much time, and we need to wrap it. But I want to continue because I got cut. I asked you, can you list certain things that cause nihilism? So this was a more societal one. So let's list maybe some stuff, some things from personal level that would lead to nihilism, even for Muslims as well. I mean, not only non-Muslims fall into nihilism.
And so it trickles down.
And move on to the cure part, inshallah.
Yeah, so the things that I was just talking about, obviously that was like on a more societal level. But if you now think about an individual in that chaos, you've got a multicultural society with many people that believe many different things. There's lots of different opinions. Everyone's sort of being promoted. Like uniqueness is being promoted. Be yourself, so on and so forth. Individualism. There's a sort of rebellion from tradition where people don't want to be like their parents. And you've got this weird thing now in modern culture, which was never present before, where you have the rapid manifestation of culture at an exponential rate. Like back in the day, trends didn't really change that often. The world that a granddad lived in wasn't going to be that much different than his great grandchildren. The clothing was going to be rather similar. You would only maybe get like the extreme elites that would be bothered about the new fashion trends and so on and so forth. But typically, the simple people or the layman or the majority, they didn't have much choice. That wasn't really available to the average person. But now with this exponential increase in technological advancements, this unlimited choice of things has been now presented to the average person, to the everyone. And what you find now is the average person is overwhelmed by this much choice. They can see so much of it, and it shuts their brain down. Now people say, oh no, more choice is better. The studies say quite the opposite. There's a really good book called The Paradox of Overchoice. The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. And you can see there why more is less, how the culture of abundance robs us of satisfaction. And there's this weird thing, and people, they just sort of assume more choice is better. And you'll see this, there's people, for example, that are already critiquing my book or the review that I did on Blogging Theology, and they just sort of posited it as if it's obvious. No, more choice is better. Quite obviously it is. But the data shows quite the opposite. That when people are given too much choice, that it robs them of satisfaction, that it can cause things like depression. It can cause a sense that what if I've made the wrong choice? They might not even make a choice at all. So there were studies done where that people were given like pensions, and they were given a catalogue of all the different places they could put their pension. And when they were given an unlimited choice, like every option that was available, they found very little participation in people making a choice. People wouldn't look through it and decide because there's just too much information. How am I going to pick the right one? I don't know. What am I going to do here? And so they wouldn't really engage with it, and they wouldn't pick at all. And the same can be the case with many different things. This is just one example. There's some people, for example, when they go into a restaurant and they're given like a bloody novel for a menu, and you've got to pick from 7,553 options. Some people are like, I don't know, just pick something for me. And they just give up and they submit and they just let the dice roll and let whoever else is going to make that decision for them. But even then, like, it becomes hard to enjoy the choice that has been made, whether that's by yourself or by someone else. And you have this now trickling down into everything, into the idea of religion, for example. That and the point of me mentioning this thing in particular was that sometimes that less choice is better. Hence why more is less. And then obviously, like, part of the thesis of the book is that if you limit choices, people are much more likely to engage. And you don't really have that going on in the West at the moment. There's not this attempt to sort of limit things, but it's in fact the opposite. They're trying to increase exponentially the amount of choices that are available to people. And this just sort of leads to this apathy. People stop caring about these things. But this is where the problem lies for the individual, is that when people stop caring about these things, they stop caring about the fundamental questions, because there's too much being said about the fundamental questions that they think it's impossible to be able to find truth in this. And so they give up on it. And when they give up on trying to find what the truth is about these fundamental questions, they just focus on easier things that are more digestible. And so that's why if you look at what's popular in pop culture, it's nonsense. You've got the Kardashians, you've got Jersey Shore, you've got these like reality TV shows where you've just got people arguing over nonsense, drama, the crap that trends on YouTube, prank stuff. Like, it's become a circus. You've got this the rising of this epic coliseum where people go to be entertained.
So how we have all these things coming to us from different directions, and these options are not really big options. Like, they're not worthy options, maybe, so to speak. It's really hard to choose. We give up. We feel kind of, if we don't have people that guide us, we feel lonely. We lose meaning. So what kind of things, a Muslim can be in this situation too, because of the lack of the sources he can reach, or the sources that reach him. So what kind of things would trigger a transition into the cure part for an individual, a Muslim or a non-Muslim, an atheist? I'm sure they are all similar in terms of triggering.
Yeah, so it depends on the person. Some people might not. Some people opt out. Yeah, so some people commit suicide. Some people attempt suicide. Some people go insane. Some people just fall into depression. Some people just become NPCs or like robots, and they just try to get on because they just don't have it in them to end their life, because it's a scary thing. It's controversial, but there has to be some level of bravery when it comes to suicide, because that's not an easy thing to do. It's very difficult. And some people just are not capable of doing that to themselves, and so they just live, and they live in the most ineffective ways possible. So it can express itself quite negatively for many people, and you can see how that is happening today. And I don't think it's that controversial to point out that some people do that. They just live. They're not living. They're not. They're in the proper sense. They're just trying to get by, and they distract themselves with Netflix, YouTube, computer games, pleasurely pursuits, whatever can just get them away from having to think about these fundamental things. But some people as well, when they fall into this, they start to get this sense of exasperated meaningless in these things, and it becomes unbearable. And that can express itself in a snap. That snap can be the suicide, but there can also be a positive snap where they can say, no, there has to be a way of getting to the truth. Or they may just say, like, am I right in being apathetic? Are there important things that I need to be thinking about? Does this really matter? Who really gives a crap about Kim Kardashian? Who really gives a crap about what this celebrity said, what that celebrity said? Who gives a crap about all of these things? There has to be more to life. And that can motivate someone to start searching. And when someone starts to search, they can start to realize there are tools that they can use to make the dealing with this information overload easier. In the same way, when Sherlock Holmes is looking for the murderer, he doesn't say, okay, one sec, we found someone that's been killed. Let's look at every human being on the planet so we can deduce who the murderer is. No, he doesn't do that. That's unnecessary. Yeah, he deduces, he makes inferences to the best explanation based on the available evidence. He looks and he narrows it down to who was at the scene of the crime, who's a likely suspect. Why are they a likely suspects? He's using reason, he's using evidence, he's using testimony, he's using inferences, he's abduction, blah 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 blah. Yeah, like there's many things that are being used, and then he narrows it down to a number of likely possibilities. And what this does is this is a way of managing the data set so that you don't have to look into absolutely everything. And there's many people when they go through this process, they can start to realize it's not that difficult, yeah, to recognize that you don't need to, like, for example, when it comes to the fundamental questions, to religion, an atheist objection against religion is often the fact that there's so many of them, yeah. Okay, but are there not similarities between many of them that we can discuss that might make this easier? Yeah, like, for example, talking about what is more likely, theism, atheism, polytheism, or, but so on and so forth. There's only a number of options. That reduces it from like however many religions there are to a number of categories, and the categories are much easier to deal with. Now, if it turns out, for example, that polytheism is absurd, or that you can't accept this notion of multiple gods, and that it's a toss between if there either is a god and the god is one, or it's atheism and there's no god. Yeah. Well, if that's the case, most of the religions just fall off of the table. And even if you look into a lot of these religions, you see traces of monotheism in them. You can say, okay, well, like, for example, Hinduism, you read the Vedas, they're very monotheistic. And it's not what you see when you're talking to like the layperson within India, has this understanding of like distinct gods or this hard polytheism. If you look at the books or the scholarship, and there's a whole series of this on Dawah-wise, but the more learned of them know that it's trying to teach something else. But these people are confused because of the presence of so many expressions of the divine. And this is very common within the Indian subcontinent, where there's all these different temples, all these different creative expressions of the divine. And it's no wonder why people, when they're embedded in this type of environment, why they might become confused and see them as distinct things. But Hinduism at its core began as monotheistic. And so if, that's just one example. You look at Buddhism. How did Buddhism come to be? It started in India. The Prince Siddhartha, he was a Hindu, and he apostated, went off, created his own religion. What did the Hindus do with him? They added him to the pantheon. He became a Hindu god. So you can see how these things developed and how the numbers increase, and you can deduce it. And so, and obviously, just because we're very short on time, you can see how you can use certain tools to deduce things and make the task easier. And I think when people start to recognize that this is something that you can do, that it's not a lost hope, that truth is attainable, with a bit of effort, with a bit of time, with a bit of patience, then I think people can find themselves digging themselves out of that black hole, so to speak. They can find themselves finding meaning in the search for truth, and inshallah, some of them stumble upon it.
All right, Jazakallah khair. I was gonna ask you your last remarks for conclusion, but that concluded really well, I guess. So it's been 1 hour. So lastly, we should show them how they can get the book. So if you go to the link below, cpinstitute.org Islam Nihilism, from there you can get the book for free PDF, or you can listen as audiobook from SoundCloud. We're gonna upload on the audio platform. What was it? The audio platform, audiobook platforms. We're gonna upload it, and you can also get a printed copy as well.
Yeah. So here's a website. You go to here, read books, and then you can see there's a link to the book here. And then on here, you've got everything. So you can download the book for free. You just put your details in there, consent, submit, and then it'll take you to to the book, or you can listen to the audio book there for free. You can click here and it'll take you to Amazon, and you can purchase a copy on Amazon. The price is just the minimal that they would charge us. The price that they put here is just the minimum they charge us to print it, so it's not for profit. If we could have made it less on Amazon, we would have done. If we could have given it away for free, we would have done. But Amazon just have like a base charge for printing and shipping, etc. But you can get it there, and yeah, have a look through it. Please do, if you read the book or listen to the audio book. It should be coming on Audible soon as well if it's not already, I think. So if you've got an Audible account, you can listen to it on Audible. Is it out already?
No, it's not ready. It takes some time to get it approved. By the way, they can also go to learn.sapiensinstitute.org to go to your course on Nihilism. It's on the same topic. It's based on the same article. The course was released before the book, but the content is pretty much the same. So you can go on and listen to that, enroll to that
here
course.
it is.
It's all free.
So everything we tried to produce, obviously apart from the hard copy or the paperback, completely free. So even the course here, it's professionally filmed, academically sourced. We're making reference to books and studies and things like that, and you can get access to all of that. There should be a PDF here. Well, there isn't at the moment. We'll try and get that sorted, so there is. And there's lots of courses, and they're all here. They're all available for you to use for free. We also have the Lighthouse Project, so if you want to discuss these things related to dawah or doubts or things like that, you can make use of the Lighthouse Project for free as well. But yeah, you can get access to all of this just at sapiensinstitute.org. You can register for the course. You can go on the learning platform. You can check out the books. Use the Lighthouse mentoring. You can maybe even sign up to one of the visionaries retreats. There's lots of things available here. So just have a little look and explore that in general. We're also expanding into other languages. So we've got Spanish, Arabic, Turkish. The Lighthouse Project has just been expanded into Spanish as well. So yeah, things are sort of developing. It's all free. Do check that out, and make sure to leave reviews of the books if you're buying them on Amazon. And yeah, we want to hear your honest feedback about your experience with the things that we're producing, so we know how we can improve and how we can move forward. Inshallah.
All right. Jazakallah khair. Do you have anything to say?
No. Jazakallah khair to all of you who have been watching, and thank you for all of your support. Please do make use of everything that we are producing, because we are hoping that the Ummah can benefit from it. May Allah accept it from all of us, increase us, and yeah, inshallah, you find this material useful. But yeah, that's everything. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. That's the end of the live. We'll see you in the next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.